He looked at his wife of 10 years and saw nothing but a dull anchor dragging him down. Arthur Sterling, the real estate mogul of Manhattan, believed he had outgrown the quiet woman who made him coffee every morning. He wanted the flash of cameras, the red carpet, and the arm of Hollywood's rising star, Serafina Blaze. He thought he was discarding a simple housewife to upgrade his life. He didn't know that by signing those divorce papers, he wasn't just ending a marriage. He was declaring war on the hidden heiress of the world's most powerful industrial dynasty. Arthur was about to learn that some steel doesn't bend. It breaks you. The silence in the penthouse on 57th Street was usually the kind that cost money. It was the silence of triple-paned glass overlooking Central Park, the silence of thick Persian rugs absorbing the sound of Italian leather loafers, and the silence of a staff trained to be invisible. But tonight, the silence felt heavy, like the drop in air pressure before a tornado touches down. Arthur Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the glittering skyline of New York City. He took a sip of his Macallan 25, the crystal tumbler catching the light. He didn't turn around when he heard the soft click of the library door opening. He knew it was Ilara. She always walked softly. That was one of the things that annoyed him lately. Everything about Ilara was soft, muted, and blending into the background. She was wearing a beige cardigan, probably cashmere, but it looked like something a librarian would wear to a book club. She held a tray with fresh coffee, despite the fact that it was past 9:15 p.m. "Arthur?" Her voice was low, steady. "You missed dinner. I told the chef to keep the sea base warm, but I'm not hungry, Ilara." Arthur cut her off, finally turning around. He placed his drink on the marble side table with a sharp clink. He reached into the inside pocket of his bespoke Brioni suit and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He tossed it onto the mahogany coffee table between them. "And we're not having coffee." Ilara stopped. She looked at the envelope, then up at his face. Her eyes, a color Arthur used to call deep hazel, but now just thought of as muddy brown, didn't widen. She didn't gasp. She just stood there, the silver tray trembling ever so slightly in her hands before she set it down on a side console. "What is this?" she asked. "It's freedom. For both of us," Arthur said, smoothing his tie. He felt a rush of adrenaline. He had rehearsed this speech with his lawyer, Marcus Thorne, at the Harvard Club earlier that afternoon. Keep it business. Keep it unemotional. Sever the limb to save the body. "I'm filing for divorce, Ilara. Those are the papers. I've had Thorne draw up a generous settlement. You get the house in the Hamptons, the small one, not the estate, and a monthly stipend for 5 years. It's more than fair considering you haven't worked a day since we married." Ilara walked over to the table and looked down at the documents. She didn't touch them. "I haven't worked," she repeated, her voice void of the hysteria he had expected. "Arthur, I managed the books for Sterling Properties for the first 6 years. I organized the chaotic mess your father left you. I was the one who told you to liquidate the retail assets before the crash in 20. Arthur waved a hand dismissively. "You did some accounting. You were a glorified bookkeeper, Ilara. Look at where I am now. Look at this city. I'm building the skyline. I need a partner who reflects that. I need someone who can stand on a red carpet, someone who commands a room. And I don't? You blend in, Ilara," Arthur sneered, his cruelty slipping through the cracks of his rehearsed composure. "You're invisible. Next week, I'm breaking ground on the Sterling Spire. It's going to be the tallest residential building in the Western Hemisphere. The press will be there. Investors from Dubai, Tokyo, London. And who do I have on my arm? A woman who prefers knitting to networking." Ilara finally picked up the papers. She flipped through them, her face unreadable. "This is about Serafina, isn't it?" Arthur stiffened. He hadn't realized she knew. Serafina Blaze was the it girl of the moment. 24, blonde, starring in the season's biggest blockbuster, and possessing an appetite for publicity that matched Arthur's own. They had been seen having lunch at the Pierre several times, but Arthur thought he had been discreet. "It's not about her," Arthur lied, though his defensive tone gave him away. "It's about us. We've grown apart. Serafina, she understands the world I live in now. She shines, Elara, and frankly, I deserve to shine too." Elara let out a small, dry laugh. It was a sound Arthur hadn't heard before. It wasn't bitter. It sounded almost like pity. "You think Serafina shines," Elara said quietly. "Arthur, she's a mirror. She just reflects whatever light is pointed at her. Once the spotlight moves, she'll be dark again." "Don't insult her," Arthur snapped, stepping closer, towering over his wife. "She has more vitality in her little finger than you have in your entire body. I want this done quietly, Elara. Sign the papers. Don't make a scene. If you contest this, I will bury you in legal fees. I will drag out the discovery process until you're selling that cardigan to buy groceries. Do you understand?" Elara looked him in the eye. For a second, Arthur felt a strange chill. There was something in her gaze, a hardness he had never seen. It reminded him of the cold, grey steel beams that held up his skyscrapers. But then she blinked, and the look was gone, replaced by her usual passivity. "You want me to sign right now?" she asked. "Yes. Thorne is coming over at 8 a.m. to collect them. I want to be a free man by the time the market opens." Elara walked over to the antique desk in the corner. She pulled out a fountain pen, a Mont Blanc he had given her for their first anniversary, back when they were happy. She didn't hesitate. She flipped to the back page and signed her name with a flourish, Elara Vance Sterling. She turned and handed him the papers. "You're making a mistake, Arthur," she said softly. "Not about the marriage. That's been dead for years. But about the business. You're about to start the Spire project. You're leveraged to the hilt. You need stability." "I have stability," Arthur scoffed, checking the signature to ensure it was valid. He felt a wave of triumph. It was so easy. She truly was weak. "I have the best architects, the best lawyers, and the best PR team money can buy. I don't need a wife telling me how to run a billion-dollar company." "You need steel, Arthur," she said cryptically. "A lot of it." "I have contracts with the suppliers." He dismissed her, walking toward the bedroom to pack a bag. He intended to stay at the plaza tonight. "It's handled. Contracts can be broken. Supply chains are fragile." Elara moved to the window where he had been standing. She looked out at the city, her reflection ghosting against the glass. "You built your castle, Arthur, but you forgot to check who owns the ground underneath it." Arthur paused at the door, his overnight bag in hand. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Elara said, turning her back to him, "Goodbye, Arthur. I'll have my things moved out by noon tomorrow. You can have the penthouse. You can have the Hamptons house. I don't want the settlement." Arthur frowned. "You don't want the money?" "I don't need your money." Arthur laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Right, you'll be back. Give it 6 months. You'll be begging for an increase in alimony." He slammed the heavy oak door behind him, the sound echoing through the vast, cold apartment. Elara stood alone in the silence. She waited until she heard the elevator ding and the hum of the lift taking him down to the garage. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone. It wasn't her usual iPhone. It was a sleek, black satellite phone with no brand markings. She dialed a number from memory. It rang once. "This is Rutherford Command," a deep voice answered instantly. "It's Ilara," she said, her voice changing completely. The softness was gone, replaced by a tone of absolute command, a voice that sounded like it could cut glass. "Initiate Protocol 7. There was a brief pause on the other end. "Protocol 7, ma'am. The Scorched Earth Directive. That targets Sterling properties." "I know what it targets," Ilara said coldly. "He wants to build the spire. He wants to shine. Let's see how he builds a skyscraper when he can't buy a single beam of steel on the North American continent." "Understood, Miss Rutherford. We will freeze the accounts at the foundry in Pittsburgh and the distribution hubs in Jersey by morning. The board has been waiting for your call." "Good," Ilara said, "and tell the board I'm coming home. I'm done playing house." She hung up the phone and looked around the penthouse one last time. It looked small to her now. Cheap. Arthur thought he was a king because he built towers of glass. He had no idea that he had been sleeping next to the Empress of Steel. 3 weeks later, the ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a sea of flashing lights, diamonds, and forced smiles. It was the annual Builders of Tomorrow Gala, the most prestigious event in the New York real estate calendar. Arthur Sterling stepped onto the red carpet, the flashbulbs erupting like a lightning storm. On his arm was Serafina Blaze. She looked magnificent, engineered for attention. She wore a dress made entirely of crimson silk that clung to her like a second skin, with a slit that went dangerously high up her thigh. A diamond choker, Arthur's gift to celebrate the finalized divorce, glittered at her throat. "Arthur! Arthur! Over here!" the paparazzi screamed. "Is it true? Are you and Serafina making it official?" Arthur flashed his signature smile, the one that had graced the cover of Forbes the previous month. He tightened his grip on Serafina's waist. "We're just here to celebrate the future of the city," he said smoothly, guiding her toward the entrance. Inside, the air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Waiters circulated with trays of caviar and champagne. Arthur felt like a god. He had done it. He had shed the dead weight of Ilara and replaced her with a woman who made every head turn. "They can't take their eyes off us," Serafina whispered, nipping at his ear. "Your ex-wife would have been hiding in the bathroom by now." Arthur chuckled. "Ilara wouldn't have even been invited if not for me. Forget her. Tonight is about the spire." As they mingled, Arthur worked the room. He shook hands with the deputy mayor, shared a joke with the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and accepted congratulations on his upgrade from more candid associates. "Sterling, you old dog," laughed Marcus Thorne, his lawyer. "I've got to hand it to you. The divorce went through faster than a Tesla in ludicrous mode. She really didn't fight for anything?" "Not a dime," Arthur said, taking a glass of champagne. "She knew she couldn't win. She's probably back in Ohio or wherever she came from, living in a condo." "Actually," a voice interrupted them. Arthur turned. It was Julian Vane, a rival developer. Vane was older, sharper, and known for being incredibly well connected in the industrial sector. He didn't look impressed by Serafina's dress. He looked amused. "I saw the guest list," Vane said, swirling his drink. "I noticed a table reserved for the Rutherford group. Front row, center." Arthur frowned. "Rutherford. The steel conglomerate." "The very same," Vane said. "The ones who supply, I don't know, 80% of the structural steel for high rises on the East Coast. I heard they have a new chairperson stepping out of the shadows tonight. Very secretive family." Arthur shrugged. "I buy my steel from a distributor in Jersey. I don't deal with the Rutherfords directly. They're old money. Dinosaurs." "If you say so," Vane smirked and walked away. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The gala host took the stage to announce the evening's main benefactors. Arthur waited for his name. He had donated $2 million to the museum to ensure he was mentioned. And now, the host boomed, we would like to welcome the platinum sponsor of this evening, representing the Global Industrial Alliance. Please welcome the new CEO of Rutherford Industries, who has returned to the helm after a decade-long sabbatical. The massive double doors at the side of the stage opened. A spotlight hit the entrance. Arthur wasn't paying much attention. He was busy picking a piece of lint off his tuxedo jacket, while Serafina checked her makeup in a compact mirror. The room went dead silent. Then, a ripple of whispers started, growing into a roar of confusion and shock. "Arthur!" Serafina hissed, nudging him. "Look!" Arthur looked up. Walking onto the stage was a woman. But it wasn't the woman Arthur remembered. She was wearing a gown of crushed velvet in a deep midnight blue, almost black. It was structured, regal, with sharp shoulders that gave her an imposing silhouette. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was loose, cascading in polished waves down her back. Around her neck was not a simple diamond choker, but the Rutherford sapphire, a stone the size of a pigeon's egg that was rumored to have been lost in the 90s. She walked to the podium with a stride that ate up the ground. She didn't look down. She didn't hesitate. She looked out at the crowd of billionaires and politicians with a gaze of absolute boredom. It was Elara. Arthur dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, splashing onto Serafina's red dress. "What the hell?" Serafina shrieked, jumping back. "Arthur, you ruined my dress!" Arthur couldn't hear her. He was frozen, his brain trying to reconcile the image of the woman who made his coffee with the Queen standing on the stage. "Good evening," Elara said into the microphone. Her voice was amplified, rich and commanding. It wasn't the soft mumble he was used to. "My name is Elara Rutherford. For the past 10 years, I stepped away from my family's legacy to observe the world from a different perspective, to understand the needs of the builders." She paused, her eyes scanning the front row until they locked directly onto Arthur. Even from 50 feet away, he felt the impact. "I learned a great deal," she continued, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "I learned that some builders care about quality, about foundation, about loyalty, and others merely care about the facade." The crowd chuckled, thinking it was a philosophical speech. Arthur felt like he was choking. "As of this morning," Elara announced, "Rutherford Industries is restructuring its client list. We will be prioritizing partners who value integrity, which means, unfortunately, we will be severing ties with several existing projects that do not meet our ethical standards." She didn't name names. She didn't have to. She held Arthur's gaze for 1 second longer, then turned and walked off the stage to thunderous applause. "Arthur!" Serafina pulled at his arm, her voice shrill. Is that your wife? The bookkeeper?" "Ex-wife," Arthur whispered, his face pale. "She's a Rutherford?" Serafina's eyes went wide. The calculation was instant. "Arthur, the Rutherfords own the shipping lines, the foundries, the mines. They are worth... God, they're worth 10 times what you are." "I didn't know," Arthur stammered. "She never said..." "She said her name was Vance." "Vance is her mother's maiden name, you idiot." Julian Vane appeared beside them again, laughing openly now. "You really didn't know? You lived with the heiress to the biggest industrial fortune in America for 10 years, and you treated her like a maid?" Arthur felt the room spinning. He looked toward the VIP table where Elara was now sitting. She was surrounded by the city's power players. The mayor was leaning in to shake her hand. The owner of the New York Times was laughing at something she said. She didn't look at Arthur. She acted as if he didn't exist. "This is bad," Arthur muttered. "The spire. The steel delivery is due next week. If she's really in charge—" "She's not just in charge, Arthur," Vane said, clapping him on the shoulder. "She is the supply chain." "And judging by that speech, I think you're about to find out what happens when you throw a rock at a tank." Arthur looked at Serafina. Suddenly, the red dress looked tacky. Her makeup looked too heavy. She looked like a cheap distraction compared to the power radiating from the woman he had just divorced. "Fix this," Serafina snapped, seeing the panic in his eyes. "Go over there and fix this. If you go broke, Arthur, I am not sticking around for the bankruptcy hearings." Arthur straightened his jacket. "I'll talk to her. She still loves me. She was obsessed with me. I just need to remind her of that." He began to push his way through the crowd toward the VIP table, unaware that he was walking directly into a trap that had been set the moment he signed those papers. The walk from the edge of the ballroom to the VIP table felt like the longest journey of Arthur Sterling's life. Every step was heavy. The whispers of the elite followed him like a swarm of angry bees. "That's the ex-husband. He dumped a Rutherford? Idiot." Arthur smoothed his tie, forcing a confident smile that didn't reach his eyes. He stopped at the velvet rope guarding the table. A massive bodyguard, a man who looked like he chewed granite for breakfast, stepped in front of him. "Step back, sir," the guard rumbled. "It's fine, Kincaid." Ilara's voice cut through the air. She didn't look up from her conversation with the mayor, but she waved a hand dismissively. "Let Mr. Sterling in. I'm sure he wants to offer his congratulations." Arthur stepped into the inner circle. Up close, Ilara looked even more intimidating. The soft, accommodating wife who used to darn his socks was gone. In her place sat a monarch. "Ilara," Arthur said, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat. "Ilara, we need to talk." Ilara finally turned her head. Her eyes were cool, detached. She looked at him the way a scientist looks at a specimen in a jar. "I believe we're done talking, Arthur. The lawyers handled everything this morning, or did you forget? You were in quite a rush." "I didn't know," Arthur hissed, leaning down so the mayor wouldn't hear. "Why didn't you tell me? Why hide who you were?" "Because," Ilara said, taking a sip of sparkling water, "I wanted to be loved for me, Arthur. Not for the Rutherford steel, not for the billions in shipping contracts, and certainly not for my family's political influence. I wanted to see if a man could love Ilara Vance, the bookkeeper." She set the glass down. The sound was sharp against the table. "And I got my answer. You didn't just stop loving me, Arthur. You erased me. You treated me like furniture that had gone out of style." "I made a mistake," Arthur pleaded, the desperation leaking into his tone. "We can fix this. The divorce, we can annul it." "I was confused. The pressure of the Spire project." Ilara laughed. It was a genuine laugh, bright and terrifying. "Annul it. Arthur, I've already had my team update the corporate registry. I'm free. And honestly, I've never felt better. What about the steel?" Arthur dropped the pretense of romance. "The Spire breaks ground on Monday. I have a contract with Jersey Steel and Supply. That's a subsidiary of Rutherford, isn't it?" "It is," Ilara nodded. "And as of 5 p.m. today, Jersey Steel and Supply is undergoing a mandatory inventory audit. It's a terrible inconvenience. All shipments are frozen for at least, let's say 6 months. Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. 6 months? You can't do that. I have penalties in my construction loans. If I don't break ground on schedule, the bank can call the loan. I'll be insolvent." "That sounds like a you problem," Ilara said, turning back to the mayor. Mr. Mayor, as I was saying, Rutherford Industries is very interested in funding the new park project. Arthur stood there, mouth open, ignored and impotent. Kincaid, the bodyguard, stepped forward and gently but firmly placed a hand on Arthur's chest. "Time to go, sir." Arthur stumbled back, nearly tripping over a chair. He looked around. Serafina was nowhere to be seen. He checked his phone. A text message from her popped up. "This is humiliating. I'm taking the limo. Get a cab. XOXO." The next morning, the reality of Ilara's audit hit. Arthur stood on the construction site of the Sterling Spire at 7:15 a.m. It was a massive hole in the ground in Midtown Manhattan, surrounded by hoardings featuring artist renderings of the gleaming glass tower. Usually, a site like this would be buzzing with noise, cranes moving, trucks beeping, men shouting. Today, it was silent. The site foreman, a burly man named Mike O'Connell, walked up to Arthur, removing his hard hat. "Mr. Sterling," Mike said, looking uncomfortable, "we got a problem." "Where are the trucks, Mike?" Arthur demanded. "Where are the I-beams?" "They didn't show. I called the depot in Jersey. They said the gates are locked. Something about a corporate restructuring ordered by the parent company." "Call the other suppliers," Arthur snapped. "Call Bethlehem. Call the guys in Pennsylvania. I don't care what it costs. Get me steel." Mike shook his head. "I did, boss. I've been on the phone since 4:15 a.m. Nobody will sell to us." "What do you mean nobody will sell to us?" "I mean," Mike sighed, "word is out. The Rutherford Group has issued a do not ship advisory on Sterling properties. They've blacklisted us, Arthur. If anyone sells steel to us, Rutherford cuts them off. And since Rutherford supplies the raw pig iron to almost every foundry on the East Coast, nobody wants to cross them." Arthur looked up at the empty sky where his tower was supposed to be. He wasn't just fighting an ex-wife. He was fighting the industrial backbone of America. His phone rang. It was Marcus Thorne, his lawyer. "Arthur, tell me you're not at the site." Thorne's voice was high-pitched, panicked. "I am. There's no steel, Marcus. She shut me down." "It's worse than that," Thorne said. "Check the news. The Financial Times just dropped an article. The Sterling bubble. Is New York's hottest developer solvent?" "Who the hell is the source?" "Anonymous. But it details your leverage ratios, Arthur. It lists the penalties for delayed construction. The banks are seeing this. Sterling Properties stock is down 12% in pre-market trading." Arthur ended the call. He felt nauseous. He looked at the giant poster of the spire, a symbol of his ego. It looked flimsy now. He needed money. If he couldn't build, he needed to service the debt until he could find a steel supplier from China or Europe, which would take months. He needed cash to keep the sharks at bay. He needed to sell something. 3 weeks had passed since the gala. The Sterling Spire site was still a ghost town. The silence of the construction site was now the loudest thing in New York City. Every day the cranes didn't move, Arthur lost $400,000 in interest payments and penalties. The atmosphere in Arthur's new penthouse, a rental since Ilara had moved out of the marital home and he couldn't bear to be there, was toxic. Serafina Blaze lay on the white leather sofa, scrolling through her phone. She was wearing a silk robe and looking bored. "Arthur, my card was declined at Bergdorf's today," she said, not looking up. It was incredibly embarrassing. The salesgirl actually gave me a sympathetic look. "I don't do sympathy, Arthur." Arthur was pacing the room, his tie undone, dark circles under his eyes. "It's a glitch, Serafina. The accounts are just being reallocated. I'm moving funds around to cover the liquidity gap." "Liquidity gap?" Serafina mocked. "That's a fancy word for broke." "Arthur, are we broke?" "No, we are not broke," Arthur shouted, making her flinch. "I am Arthur Sterling. I have assets worth billions." "Assets you can't build," Serafina countered, sitting up. "I read the papers. Elara has you in a chokehold. Why don't you just apologize to her? Beg her?" "I will never beg her," Arthur spat. "I have a meeting with the private equity board at BlackRock in an hour. They'll give me a bridge loan. I'll import the steel from Turkey. It will take 2 months, but we'll survive." 2 months. Serafina stood up. "Arthur, the Cannes Film Festival is in 2 weeks. You promised we'd go on the yacht. You promised to introduce me to Spielberg." "The yacht is being chartered out," Arthur yelled. "I need the cash flow, Serafina. Can't you think about anything other than yourself for 5 minutes?" Serafina stared at him. The mask of the adoring girlfriend slipped completely. Her face became hard, calculating, the face of a woman who had clawed her way up from commercials to feature films. "I didn't sign up for this," she said coldly. "I signed up for a billionaire, not a stressed-out, shouting man with a halted construction site and an angry ex-wife who runs the world." "You signed up for me," Arthur said, stepping toward her. "We're partners." "We're not married, Arthur," she reminded him. "And thank God for that. I'm going to stay at the Four Seasons tonight. I need space." "You're leaving me?" Arthur couldn't believe it. "Now? When things are tough?" "I have a brand to protect, Arthur," she said, walking to the bedroom to pack. "Being associated with a failing developer isn't on brand for me right now. Call me when the steel arrives. Or don't." Arthur watched her go. He didn't stop her. He was too exhausted. He straightened his suit, splashed cold water on his face, and went to the meeting at BlackRock. This was his last chance. If he could get the bridge loan, he could bypass the Rutherford embargo. The boardroom at BlackRock was cold and grey. 3 executives sat across from Arthur. They looked grim. "Arthur," the lead executive, a man named Davis, started. "We've reviewed your application for the emergency liquidity line." "And?" Arthur asked, gripping the edge of the table. "The assets are there. The land alone is worth $300 million. "The land is collateralized against your primary construction loan," Davis said, "and we've received word that your primary lender is moving to call the loan due to breach of contract regarding the construction timeline." "They can't do that," Arthur slammed his hand on the table. "I need more time." "There's more," Davis said, sliding a folder across the table. "We can't lend to you, Arthur. It's too high risk. But we did receive an offer to buy out your debt." Arthur frowned. "Buy out my debt? Who?" "A holding company called Vance Global Ventures." Arthur froze. Vance, Elara's mother's name. "She's buying my debt," Arthur whispered. "She's not just stopping the steal. She's trying to foreclose on me." "If Vance Global buys the debt," Davis explained, "they become your primary creditor. If you default, which you will without the steal, they have the right to seize the assets, including the land, including the Spire project." Arthur stood up, his legs shaking. "Don't sell it to her. I'll find another way." "We have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders, Arthur," Davis said, not unkindly. "Her offer is full face value. We're accepting it at noon today." Arthur checked his watch. It was 11:15 a.m. He had 45 minutes before Elara owned him. He ran out of the building. He didn't call his driver. He hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Rutherford Tower," Arthur gasped. "And step on it." He had to face her. He had to beg. Serafina was right. He had no leverage, no steel, and no wife. The only thing he had left was his pride, and he was about to trade that in for survival. Arthur burst into the lobby of Rutherford Tower. It was an older building, Art Deco, screaming of old money and established power. the exact opposite of the flashy glass boxes Arthur built. "I need to see Alara Rutherford," he shouted at the receptionist. "Do you have an appointment, Mr. Sterling?" the receptionist asked coolly. She evidently knew exactly who he was. Tell her I'm here to sign the surrender," Arthur said, defeated. The receptionist made a call. A moment later, she nodded. "Top floor. She's expecting you." Arthur rode the elevator up, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. The doors opened to a massive office that looked more like a library. Dark wood, green lamps, and a view that dominated the city. Alara sat behind a desk the size of a small car. She was writing something. She didn't look up immediately. "You're early," she said. "The bank transfer doesn't go through until 12 at Kotassos." Arthur walked to the desk. He looked at the woman he had discarded. She looked beautiful, powerful, and utterly unreachable. "Alara," he said, his voice broken. "Stop it. Please, you've made your point. You've humiliated me. You've scared off Serafina. You've ruined my reputation. Isn't that enough?" Alara finally looked up. Her eyes were hard. "This isn't about revenge, Arthur. This is business. You taught me that. Sever the limb to save the body. Remember?" "I'm not a limb," Arthur cried. "I'm your husband. I was your husband." "You were a liability," Alara corrected him. "You wanted to build the tallest tower in New York on a foundation of lies and ego. I'm just taking over the project to ensure it's built correctly." "You want the spire?" "I want the land," Alara said. "I'm going to repurpose the project. Affordable housing, mixed-use community spaces. Something the city actually needs, not another monument to a man's vanity." "You can't take my dream," Arthur whispered. "I can," Alara said, standing up. She walked around the desk and leaned against it, crossing her arms. "But I'm not heartless, Arthur. I have a proposal." Arthur looked up, a glimmer of hope sparking in his chest. "A proposal?" "I will stop the debt purchase," Alara said. "I will release the steel shipment from Jersey. I will let you build your tower." "What do I have to do?" Arthur asked, ready to agree to anything. Alara smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "You have to admit the truth, publicly. I've scheduled a press conference for 1 p.m. in the lobby. You will go down there, and you will tell the world that the only reason Sterling Properties exists is because of Alara Vance's genius. You will admit that you are a fraud who relied on his wife's brain for 10 years, and then you will resign as CEO. Arthur recoiled as if slapped. "Resign? But it's my company." "You can keep your shares," Alara said. "You'll be rich, Arthur. You can go to Cannes with your actress. You can live the life of luxury you always wanted, but you will not run the company. You will be a figurehead, a silent partner, and I will appoint the new CEO." "Who?" Arthur asked, dread pooling in his stomach. "Me," Alara said. "I'm taking back what I built. So, Arthur, do you want to be a rich, humiliated nobody? Or do you want to be a bankrupt, humiliated nobody? The choice is yours." Arthur stared at her. The clock on the wall ticked. 11:45 a.m. He thought of Serafina leaving him. He thought of the empty construction site. He thought of the laughing faces of his rivals. Arthur started. Just then, the door opened. A young woman walked in. It was Alara's assistant. "Ms. Rutherford, I have an urgent update," the assistant said, looking at Arthur nervously. "It's about Ms. Blaze, Serafina Blaze." "What about her?" Arthur snapped. "She's currently live on Instagram," the assistant said, holding up a tablet. She's giving an interview to TMZ. She says she has proof that Arthur Sterling has been embezzling funds from his investors to pay for her jewelry." Arthur grabbed the tablet. On the screen, Serafina was crying fake tears, holding up a diamond necklace. "He told me it was a gift," Serafina sobbed to the camera. "I didn't know he stole the money from the pension fund. I'm a victim here." Arthur dropped the tablet. "That's a lie. I bought that with my dividends." "It doesn't matter if it's true," Ilara said quietly, watching the screen. "The SEC will investigate. The stock will crash to zero within the hour. The bank won't sell me the debt now, Arthur. They'll freeze everything." She looked at Arthur with something close to pity. "It's over, Arthur. I can't even save you now. The rat didn't just leave the ship. She torpedoed it." The silence in Ilara's office following the broadcast was heavier than the steel beams her family manufactured. On the tablet screen, the live stream had ended, replaced by a looped clip of Serafina Blaze wiping a tear from her cheek. The headline, "Sterling Fraud. Actress exposes real estate Ponzi scheme," flashing in bold red letters beneath her. Arthur stared at the black screen, his hands trembling violently. "She's lying," he whispered, his voice sounding thin and reedy in the massive room. "I never embezzled a cent. The books are clean. You know they're clean, Ilara. You set them up." Ilara sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. She didn't look angry, and she certainly didn't look sympathetic. She looked like a judge watching a guilty man try to explain away a murder weapon. "I set up the books 10 years ago, Arthur," she said calmly. "I maintained them with impeccable precision until the day you asked for a divorce. Since then, you've had Marcus Thorne and that new CFO, the one who looks like a terrified accountant from a cartoon. Who knows what corners they cut to pay for Serafina's lifestyle?" "We didn't cut corners," Arthur yelled, pacing the room, running his hands through his hair until it stood up in wild tufts. "I used the operational capital. It was a loan to myself. I was going to pay it back once the Spire pre-sales came in." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "A loan to yourself from operational capital without board approval? In the eyes of the SEC, Arthur, that is embezzlement. It's commingling of funds. It's illegal." Arthur stopped pacing, the color drained from his face. But everyone does it. No, Arthur. Criminals do it, and desperate men do it." Ilara stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street. "You should come look at this." Arthur walked to the window. His knees nearly gave out. Down below, surrounding the entrance to Rutherford Tower, were 6 black SUVs with flashing blue lights. Uniformed officers were setting up a perimeter. A news van was already pulling up to the curb. "They're here for me?" Arthur asked, his voice barely a squeak. "The DOJ doesn't waste time when a high-profile whistleblower goes public," Ilara said. "Serafina didn't just go on Instagram, Arthur. My sources tell me she walked into the district attorney's office 3 hours ago with a box of documents. She gave them everything. Your credit card statements, your emails, the private ledgers you kept in the safe at the penthouse." "She stole my ledgers?" Arthur grabbed the windowsill for support. "That treacherous! I bought her a career. I bought her that necklace." "And now she's using them to buy her immunity," Ilara said. "She's painting herself as the naive victim who discovered her boyfriend was a crook and did the right thing. She'll come out of this a hero. You're the villain of the week." The intercom on Ilara's desk buzzed. "Ms. Rutherford, federal agents are in the lobby. They have a warrant for the arrest of Arthur Sterling. They're asking if he's in the building." Ilara pressed the button. "Send them up." Arthur spun around. "Ilara, you can't let them take me. I'm your husband. I'm family." "You made it very clear that we are not family, Arthur," Ilara said, her voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze mercury. "You wanted to be a self-made man. Well, this is the part where you make it on your own. The elevator doors pinged open. 4 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI stepped out. They didn't look like the movie agents. They looked tired, bored, and efficient. "Arthur Sterling?" the lead agent asked. "This is a mistake," Arthur stammered, backing away until he bumped into Ilara's desk. "I need to call my lawyer." "You can call him from booking," the agent said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Arthur looked at Ilara one last time. He wanted her to stop this. He wanted her to use the Rutherford influence, to make a call, to yell at them. But she just stood there, hands clasped in front of her dark velvet dress, watching. "Ilara, please," he begged, as the cold metal clicked around his wrists. "Help me." "I did help you, Arthur," she said softly. "I told you to check the foundation. You didn't listen." The agents marched him out. The walk through the lobby was a blur of humiliation. The staff of Rutherford Industries, people who knew Ilara, people who knew how he had treated her, watched in silence. There were no smirks, just the cold judgment of the working class watching a king fall. As they pushed him out the revolving doors, the world exploded into white light. The paparazzi were there, hundreds of them. They screamed his name. "Arthur, did you steal the pension funds? Is Serafina telling the truth? How does it feel to lose everything?" Arthur lowered his head, trying to shield his face with his shoulder. But it was no use. The image of Arthur Sterling, the Manhattan mogul, being shoved into the back of a federal vehicle in handcuffs, was beamed instantly to every smartphone in America. Across town, in a plush suite at the Four Seasons, Serafina Blaze watched the coverage on a 60-inch TV. She took a sip of champagne, adjusted the diamond necklace that was now evidence, and smiled. She picked up her phone and texted Julian Vane. "He's in custody. Phase 1 complete. When do we announce the movie deal about my tragic ordeal?" 6 months later, a biting winter wind whipped through Manhattan. Arthur Sterling stood in the back of a crowded auction hall, face hidden by a cheap baseball cap. A banner above the stage read, "U.S. Marshals, Asset Forfeiture." "Lot 410, the auctioneer droned. "The architectural model of the Sterling Spire. Do I hear $50? "Sold," a man in the front yelled. "My kid needs a dollhouse." Arthur turned and walked out, bile rising in his throat. His legacy had just been sold for the price of a tank of gas. He stumbled onto the sidewalk, only to be blocked by a sleek black limousine. The window rolled down, revealing Julian Vane and Serafina Blaze. She was draped in white fur, looking like a movie star. He looked like the cat who ate the canary. "Arthur," Serafina smirked, lowering her sunglasses. "You look terrible. Jail suits you." "I'm not in jail yet," Arthur rasped. "Give it a week," Julian laughed. "I just bought your Spire site from the bankruptcy trustee this morning. We're renaming it the Vane Blaze Plaza. I hear the DA is offering you 10 years if you plead guilty today. You should take it." They didn't wait for a response. The window rolled up, and the limo purred away, leaving Arthur standing in the exhaust fumes. Defeated, Arthur wandered into a small, greasy diner in Hell's Kitchen. He slumped into a booth, staring at his last $7. He was ready to give up. He would call the lawyer and take the plea deal. "Is this seat taken?" Arthur looked up. Ilara sat opposite him, sliding a thick blue folder across the chipped table. She wore a sharp grey suit, radiating the power he had lost. "If you're here to gloat, Ilara, I can't take it," he whispered. "I don't gloat, Arthur. I execute," she said. "Julian Vane bought your land today. He thinks he won. But he was sloppy." She tapped the folder. "My great-grandfather put a covenant on that deed in 1920. Any structure built there must use 60% Rutherford steel. Vane has already signed contracts for cheap Chinese imports. The moment he breaks ground, the land reverts to the original owner. Me. Arthur blinked, a spark of life returning to his eyes. You set a trap. I did, she nodded. But to spring it, I need him to feel safe. I need him to think you're buried. She reached into her bag and placed a small USB drive on the table. What is this? Security footage from the penthouse, Ilara said softly. You forgot the server backs up to my cloud account. It has audio of Serafina talking to Vane months ago. It proves she was paid to frame you. It proves the embezzlement was a setup. Arthur grabbed the drive, his hands shaking. This clears me. This sends them to prison. Why? He asked, tears streaming down his face. After everything I did to you. Why save me? Ilara stood up, her expression cool but not cruel. I didn't do it for you, Arthur. I did it for the truth. You were a bad husband, but you weren't a criminal. Ilara, he called out as she turned to leave. Does this mean, is there a chance for us? She paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder. Arthur, you broke the glass. You can glue it back together, but it will always be cracked. Clear your name. Rebuild your life. But do it far away from me. She walked out into the cold, leaving Arthur with the weapon he needed to kill the giants. He clenched the drive in his fist. He wasn't the King of New York anymore, but for the first time in months, he had a fighting chance. The federal courthouse in Manhattan was packed. The air was thick with the scent of wet wool and nervous sweat. Arthur sat at the defense table, his cheap suit hanging loosely on his frame. Beside him was a public defender who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. On the witness stand sat Serafina Blaze. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the heartbroken victim to perfection. He told me he was moving money to an offshore account, she sobbed into the microphone. He said he needed to hide it from the IRS. I didn't know he was stealing from the company. The prosecutor nodded sympathetically. And did you ever see Mr. Sterling with Mr. Julian Vane? Never, she lied smoothly. Arthur hated Mr. Vane. Arthur's public defender stood up. He didn't have the swagger of Marcus Thorne, but he had the USB drive. Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce a new piece of evidence, Exhibit G. The prosecutor objected, but the judge allowed it. The courtroom screens flickered to life. The video was grainy, taken from a high angle in the penthouse, but the audio was crystal clear. Serafina appeared on screen, lounging on the sofa, phone to her ear. Julian, stop worrying, the digital Serafina laughed. He's completely clueless. I just got him to fire his CFO. The books are a mess. By the time the audit hits, Sterling Properties will be worth zero. Just make sure my transfer clears before the indictment. A gasp ripped through the gallery. In the front row, Julian Vane stood up, knocking his chair over. This is illegal. That's a private conversation. Sit down, the bailiff shouted. On the stand, the real Serafina turned pale. The Survivor of the Year facade cracked. She looked around frantically, realizing the cameras in the back of the room weren't broadcasting her triumph, but her funeral. I was acting, she stammered. It was a rehearsal. For a crime, the judge asked, peering over his glasses. The fallout was swift and brutal. The video didn't just clear Arthur, it implicated Vane in a federal conspiracy. Before the sun set, Serafina Blaze was in handcuffs for perjury and fraud. Julian Vane was arrested trying to board a private jet to the Caymans. Arthur walked out of the courthouse, a free man. The paparazzi were there, but the flashbulbs didn't feel like adulation anymore. They felt like sparks from a welder's torch, harsh and blinding. He didn't go back to real estate. He couldn't. His name was cleared, but his reputation was scarred, and his fortune was gone. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, a man in a hard hat and a neon vest directed a cement truck into a small construction site in Brooklyn. It was a community center project, modest, functional, and sturdy. Arthur wiped sweat from his brow. He wasn't the CEO. He was just a site foreman. He made a wage, lived in a studio apartment, and took the subway. But for the first time in his life, he was actually building something real. He looked across the street. A black town car was idling at the red light. In the back seat, he saw a silhouette he knew by heart. Elara was reading a file, looking powerful and serene. She looked up. Their eyes met through the tinted glass. Arthur didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just nodded, a small, respectful acknowledgement of the woman who had broken him down so he could finally build himself into a man worthy of the space he occupied. Elara watched him for a second, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Then the light turned green, and the car slipped away into the traffic of the city she now owned. Arthur blew his whistle. "All right, let's pour the foundation," he shouted to his crew. "And make sure it's deep. We're building this one to last." What a ride. Arthur Sterling thought he was trading up, but he learned the hard way that when you chase the glitter, you often lose the gold. This story reminds us that true value isn't found in red carpets or flashbulbs, but in loyalty, integrity, and the strength of your foundation. Arthur lost his billions, but he regained his humanity and saw justice served cold to those who tried to destroy him. I hope you enjoyed this dramatic saga of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. What would you have done if you were Elara? Would you have helped Arthur at the end, or let him rot in prison? Let me know in the comments below. If you want more stories about karma hitting hard and secrets being revealed, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a twist.